Have you ever wondered how a single act of kindness could change your life forever? Ethan Harper, a 12-year-old boy from a struggling neighborhood, thought he was just helping an elderly man lift some wooden planks. Little did he know that small gesture would set off a chain of events that would test his limits, challenge his resilience, and transform his future. In today's story, we follow Ethan as he navigates overwhelming responsibilities at home, a demanding new job, and unexpected hurdles in his community, all while carrying the weight of his family's dreams on his young shoulders. Will Ethan rise above the odds to make a better life for himself and those he loves? Or will the challenges prove too much to bear? Let us know in the comments if you've ever experienced a moment where helping someone led to something amazing. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe for more inspirational stories, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a moment of these heartfelt journeys. Now, let's dive into Ethan's incredible journey, a tale of perseverance, family, and the power of one small act of kindness. Ethan Harper gripped the handlebars of his bike, his fingers chilled by the crisp morning air. The streets of Willow Grove were quiet at this hour, bathed in the soft orange glow of the rising sun. His paper route was a familiar path, one he had taken nearly every day for the past 2 years. Each turn and crack in the road were as familiar as the lines on his 12-year-old hands. The newspapers, stacked haphazardly in the crate attached to the back of his bike, wobbled as he pedaled over a pothole. Ethan steadied the load with one hand and sighed. His bike was older than he was, a hand-me-down patched together with mismatched parts, but it got the job done. Willow Grove wasn't the kind of place where people talked about dreams. Most of the neighborhood's residents had been hit hard by the factory closures years ago, and the remnants of that prosperity were barely visible now. Houses leaned slightly to one side, their paint peeling under the weight of neglect. Ethan's own house, a modest single-story rental, was no different. The Harpers had seen their fair share of struggles. Ethan's mom, Laura, worked 2 jobs cleaning offices during the day and waitressing at a diner in the evenings. She was proud, never complaining, but Ethan had noticed the way her shoulders drooped after long shifts and the way she massaged her aching hands when she thought no one was looking. Ethan's little sister, Sophie, was only 7, but she carried a brightness that seemed out of place in their worn-down world. She greeted every morning with a burst of energy, her messy curls bouncing as she rattled off the adventures she'd dreamed up overnight. Ethan often thought of her as the glue holding their family together, her laughter lifting their spirits on the hardest days. Ethan had just turned on a Maple Street when he saw the old man. At first, he thought it was just someone out for an early morning walk, but as he got closer, he realized the man was struggling with a heavy plank of wood. A small pile of boards lay scattered across the yard, remnants of what looked like a collapsed stack. The man, hunched and frail, gripped the plank with trembling hands. His face was etched with lines of effort and exhaustion. Ethan slowed his bike, his heart sinking as he watched the man try and fail to lift the wood. He hesitated. His delivery schedule was tight, and stopping now would mean rushing to finish later. But something about the scene tugged at him. He set his bike against the fence and called out, "Hey, mister, need some help?" The man looked up, startled. His watery eyes were tired but kind. "Help?" he asked, his voice rough with age. "Yeah," Ethan said, stepping closer. "That looks heavy. I can help you move it." The man hesitated before nodding. "If you're sure. These old bones aren't what they used to be." Ethan grabbed one end of the plank, surprised at how heavy it was. Together, they managed to lift it and carry it to the side of the yard. Sweat beaded on Ethan's forehead despite the chill in the air. "You're stronger than you look," the man said with a faint chuckle. "It's nothing," Ethan replied, brushing the dirt off his hands. "What happened here?" "Wind knocked over the stack last night," the man explained. "I was trying to get it out of the way before the neighbors complained." Ethan glanced at the remaining planks. "I can help with the rest if you want." The man blinked, surprised. "You sure? Don't you have somewhere to be?" Ethan shrugged. "It's fine. Let's get it done." For the next 20 minutes, Ethan worked alongside the man, moving each plank carefully. By the time they finished, his arms were sore, but the satisfaction of seeing the neatly stacked wood made it worth it. "Thank you, son," the man said, leaning against the wall to catch his breath. Not many would have stopped to help. Ethan smiled awkwardly. It's no big deal. You look like you needed it. The man extended a hand. Name's Henry Mason. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to ask. Ethan Harper, he replied, shaking the man's hand. Take care, Mr. Mason. As Ethan pedaled away, he couldn't shake the image of Henry's tired smile. It had been such a small thing helping move some wood, but it felt important. By the time Ethan finished his paper route, the sun was high in the sky. He parked his bike outside the house and stepped inside, greeted by the familiar smell of beans simmering on the stove. Ethan, you're late, Laura called from the kitchen. Sorry, Ma. Ethan replied, dropping his bag by the door. I had to help someone. Laura appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Help someone? What happened? There was this old guy, Mr. Mason. He needed help moving some wood, Ethan explained. Laura gave him a long look, her expression softening. You got a good heart, Ethan. Just don't let people take advantage of it. I won't, Ethan said, though her words lingered. Sophie ran into the room, her face lighting up when she saw Ethan. Gabby, you're home. Ethan laughed as she wrapped her arms around his waist. Miss me, Squirt? She nodded enthusiastically. I drew you a picture. She ran to the kitchen table and grabbed a sheet of paper, holding it up proudly. It was a crayon drawing of their family, Ethan, Sophie, and Laura standing in front of their house. Ethan's heart swelled as he took the drawing. This is amazing, Sophie. I'm going to put it on my wall. You like it? She asked, beaming. Of course I do, Ethan said, ruffling her curls. That night, as the house grew quiet, Ethan lay awake in bed. His arms ached from the day's work, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Henry. Something about the old man's gratitude stuck with him. He didn't feel like a hero, just a kid trying to do the right thing, but it felt good to help someone. The next morning, Ethan's routine resumed as usual. He was halfway through his deliveries when he passed by Henry's house. The wood pile was neatly stacked, just as they'd left it. Henry wasn't outside, but Ethan felt a small flicker of pride as he rode past. Ethan's home life revolved around the rhythm of their small household, each day blending into the next with an unspoken agreement to do their best for each other. After finishing his paper route, Ethan often spent his afternoons helping around the house while Laura worked long hours. Sophie's boundless energy filled the quiet moments, her laughter echoing through the walls. One evening, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, a pile of Sophie's schoolbooks spread out before him. Sophie sat cross-legged in the chair beside him, her face scrunched up in concentration as she copied letters from a workbook. Gabby, how do you spell butterfly again? She asked, her pencil poised midair. Ethan leaned over to check her work. You've almost got it. Sophie frowned, erasing furiously. Why do all the good words have so many letters? Ethan laughed. You'll get it. You're smart, Squirt. Laura entered the room, her face drawn with exhaustion, but her smile warm. You're a good teacher, Ethan. Sophie's lucky to have you. Thanks, Ma, Ethan said, feeling a flicker of pride. He turned back to Sophie. Okay, one more time. Let's get it right. The neighborhood of Willow Grove was small and tight-knit, but it bore the scars of economic hardship. Most families, like the Harpers, scraped by with whatever work they could find. Despite this, there was a sense of community, a shared understanding that everyone was doing their best to survive. Ethan knew almost everyone on his paper route. There was Mrs. Lopez, who always greeted him with a plate of cookies when he delivered her paper. Mr. Johnson at the corner store was gruff but kind in his own way, slipping Ethan an extra piece of candy for Sophie every now and then. But not everyone in Willow Grove was as supportive. A group of older boys, known for loitering near the park, often made snide remarks when Ethan rode by. Still playing delivery boy, Harper? One of them sneered as Ethan passed one afternoon. Ethan ignored them, focusing on pedaling faster. He didn't have time for their nonsense, but their words stung. When he got home, Laura noticed the tension in his shoulders. What's wrong? She asked, setting down a pot of beans on the stove. Nothing, Ethan mumbled. Laura gave him a knowing look, but didn't press further. You don't have to let people like that bother you, Ethan. They don't know how hard you work. I know, Ethan said. It's just, it gets old, you know? Laura nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. You're stronger than you think, Ethan. Don't forget that. One night, after Laura and Sophie had gone to bed, Ethan sat on the porch steps, staring out at the quiet street. The night air was cool, and the faint hum of cicadas filled the silence. His thoughts wandered back to Henry Mason. The old man's gratitude had been so genuine, and it made Ethan realize how rare it was for people to stop and truly see each other. In Willow Grove, life moved fast, even when it felt slow. Everyone was caught up in their own struggles. Ethan thought about Laura and how hard she worked to keep their family afloat. He thought about Sophie, who deserved so much more than what they could give her. And he thought about himself, how much he wanted to help, to make things better, even if he didn't know how. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out Sophie's latest drawing, now creased from being folded and unfolded so many times. It was a picture of their family standing in front of their house, with a bright yellow sun shining down on them. Ethan traced the lines with his finger, a small smile tugging at his lips. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew he would do whatever it took to protect that picture to make Sophie's vision of their family a reality. The following morning, Ethan decided to stop by Henry Mason's house again. Something about the man had stayed with him, and he wanted to check in. When he arrived, Henry was sitting on the porch, a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. He looked up and smiled when he saw Ethan. "Back again, huh?" Henry said. "Didn't think I'd see you so soon." Ethan shrugged. "Just wanted to see how you were doing." Henry gestured to the chair beside him. "Well, sit down then. No use standing around." Ethan sat, the wooden chair creaking under his weight. For a while, they talked about the weather, about Henry's years working in the factories, and about the neighborhood. "You remind me of myself when I was your age," Henry said after a pause. "Really?" Ethan asked, doubtful. "'Cause it's hard to believe, I know. But yeah, I used to take odd jobs to help my family. We didn't have much, but we had each other. That's what mattered." Ethan nodded, his chest tightening. He thought of Laura and Sophie, of the quiet sacrifices they all made for each other. Henry reached over and patted Ethan's shoulder. "You're a good kid, Ethan. Don't let this world make you hard." "I'll try," Ethan said, though he wasn't sure what Henry meant. As he left, Ethan felt lighter, as if the weight of his responsibilities had eased, if only for a little while. The next morning started like any other. Ethan was halfway through his paper route when he noticed something unusual, a sleek black car parked outside Henry Mason's house. The car stood out in Willow Grove, where most vehicles were old trucks or second-hand sedans held together with duct tape and prayers. Ethan slowed his bike, curiosity mingling with unease. As he approached, the driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, sharply dressed, and bore a striking resemblance to Henry. "Are you Ethan Harper?" the man asked, his voice calm but direct. Ethan hesitated. Yeah. Who's asking?" The man smiled faintly. "I'm James Mason. My father, Henry, told me about you. He said you helped him the other day." Ethan nodded, shifting on his feet. "Yeah, I guess so. Is he okay?" James's smile widened. "He's fine. Better than he's been in a while, actually. And it's thanks to you. He wanted me to come find you to thank you properly." "Thank me?" Ethan asked, confused. "I didn't do anything special." "To you, maybe it wasn't special," James replied. "But to him, it meant a lot. And to me too." James gestured to the car, pulling out a briefcase and a small envelope. "Listen, Ethan, I run a logistics company downtown. We're always looking for hard-working young people with integrity, and my father couldn't stop talking about you. I'd like to offer you a chance to work with us, a way to earn a little more and maybe learn some new skills." Ethan's eyes widened. "A job? At your company?" James nodded. "It's nothing glamorous, but it's honest work. Sorting papers, running small errands, simple stuff to start. What do you think?" Ethan hesitated. He thought about his current schedule, delivering papers, helping Laura around the house, looking after Sophie. Could he really take on more? "I'd have to talk to my mom," Ethan said finally. "Of course," James said, handing Ethan a business card. "Take your time, and if you decide you're interested, give me a call." Ethan rode home that day with his mind racing. He wasn't sure if this was a chance he could take or if it was even real, but something about James's sincerity made him want to believe. That evening, Ethan sat at the kitchen table, James's business card lying between him and Laura. Sophie was in the other room, humming to herself as she played with her stuffed animals. Laura frowned as she studied the card. A logistics company's? And he just offered you a job out of nowhere. Ethan nodded. He said it was because of Mr. Mason, that it was his way of saying thanks. Laura leaned back in her chair, her expression skeptical. I don't know, Ethan. It seems too good to be true. People don't just give things like this for free. I know, Ma, Ethan said quietly. But what if it's real? What if this is a chance for us to make things a little easier? Laura's eyes softened, but her worry didn't fade. You're 12, Ethan. You've already got so much on your plate. I don't want you overworking yourself. I can handle it, Ethan said, his voice firmer than he expected. You always say I'm stronger than I think. Let me try, Ma. Please. After a long silence, Laura sighed. All right, but I'm coming with you when you meet this James Mason. If anything seems off, we're walking away. Ethan nodded, relief washing over him. Deal. 2 days later, Ethan and Laura stood outside a modest office building on the edge of downtown. The paint was fresh, the windows clean, nothing like the rundown structures Ethan was used to in Willow Grove. James greeted them at the door, his demeanor warm and professional. Ethan, Laura, welcome. Come on in. The office was bustling with activity. Phones rang. Employees typed furiously at their desks, and stacks of papers were neatly organized on every surface. Ethan felt both intimidated and intrigued. James led them to a small conference room and introduced them to David, a friendly-looking man in his 30s. David will be your supervisor, Ethan, James explained. He'll show you the ropes and make sure you're comfortable. David extended a hand. Nice to meet you, Ethan. James has told me good things. Nice to meet you, too, Ethan said, shaking his hand. For the next few hours, David walked Ethan through the basics, sorting invoices, filing documents, and organizing shipments. It was tedious work, but Ethan approached it with focus and determination. At one point, David leaned over and whispered, You've got a good work ethic, kid. Keep it up. By the end of the day, Ethan was exhausted but proud. He had managed to keep up with the tasks and even earned a few nods of approval from other employees. On the way home, Laura turned to Ethan. What did you think? I think I can do this, Ethan said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Over the next few weeks, Ethan began to settle into his new routine. Mornings were still dedicated to delivering papers, but his afternoons were spent at the office, learning and working alongside David and the rest of the team. David quickly became a mentor, offering guidance and encouragement when Ethan struggled with more complicated tasks. Don't worry about speed right now, David told him one afternoon. Focus on getting it right. The rest will come with time. Ethan nodded, his fingers trembling slightly as he entered data into the company's system. Each keystroke felt like a small victory. Outside of work, Ethan found himself reflecting more on Henry's words. He stopped by Henry's house one weekend, finding the old man sitting on the porch with a blanket draped over his legs. Ethan, Henry said, his face lighting up. How's the big job treating you? It's good, Ethan replied, sitting on the porch steps. A little overwhelming, but I'm learning a lot. Henry nodded, his gaze distant. Good. You keep learning, son. That's how you grow. Those words stayed with Ethan. He knew his job wasn't glamorous, but it was a step towards something bigger. As Ethan grew more comfortable in his new role, the weight of balancing work, home, and school began to wear on him. His mornings started before dawn, delivering papers while the town was still asleep. After school, he rushed to the office, where hours of filing, organizing, and assisting with shipments awaited. By the time he got home, exhaustion settled over him like a heavy blanket. One afternoon, David handed Ethan a large stack of invoices. These need to be sorted by date and cross-checked with the system. Think you can handle it? Ethan nodded, though his chest tightened at the sight of the paperwork. He took the stack to his desk and began working, but the words and numbers blurred together after a while. His focus wavered, and he accidentally entered the wrong data for one of the invoices. When David reviewed the work later, he frowned. Ethan, this doesn't match the record. What happened here? Ethan's face burned with embarrassment. I must have made a mistake. I'm sorry. David's expression softened. It's okay. Mistakes happen. Just make sure to double-check next time, all right? Ethan nodded, but the frustration lingered. He wanted to prove himself, not hold the team back. At home, Ethan's long hours didn't go unnoticed. Laura often watched him with a worried expression as he pushed himself to finish homework after dinner or helped Sophie with her school projects. One evening, as Ethan struggled to keep his eyes open while reading a textbook, Laura sat beside him. "Ethan, you're working too hard," she said gently. "I'm fine, Ma," Ethan replied, stifling a yawn. Laura shook her head. "You're 12, Ethan. You shouldn't have to carry so much on your shoulders." "I have to," Ethan said, his voice firm. "You work so hard for us. I want to help." Laura's eyes softened, but her worry didn't fade. "Just promise me you won't push yourself too far. You're allowed to rest too." Ethan nodded, though he wasn't sure he could keep that promise. Meanwhile, Sophie seemed to notice the shift in their home dynamic. One night, she climbed on Ethan's bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Gabby, are you going to stop playing with me now that you have a fancy job?" she asked, her voice small. Ethan's heart sank. He wrapped an arm around her. "Never, Squirt. No matter how busy I get, I'll always have time for you." Sophie's face lit up. "Promise, promise," Ethan said, though a pang of guilt tugged at him. Despite the challenges, Ethan's hard work didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, James called Ethan into his office. "You've been here for a few weeks now," James began, leaning back in his chair. "How are you finding things?" "It's good," Ethan said, his voice cautious. "I'm learning a lot." James smiled. "That's what I like to hear. I've been keeping an eye on you, and I have to say I'm impressed. You're dedicated, reliable, and willing to learn qualities that are hard to find, even in adults." Ethan felt a swell of pride. "Thank you, Mr. Mason." James nodded. "Keep it up, Ethan. I see a lot of potential in you." Later that day, David handed Ethan a new task, a small project that required him to organize a shipment's delivery schedule. It was more responsibility than Ethan had ever been given, and he approached it with a mix of excitement and nervousness. For hours, he worked meticulously, checking and rechecking every detail. When he finally submitted the completed schedule to David, the older man gave him a thumbs up. "Nice work, Ethan. You got a knack for this," David said. The praise left Ethan grinning for the rest of the day. One Saturday, as Ethan was tidying his desk at work, a familiar voice called out. "Hard at work, I see." Ethan looked up to find Henry Mason standing in the doorway, a cane in one hand and a warm smile on his face. "Mr. Mason!" Ethan exclaimed, rushing over. "What are you doing here?" "Came to see how my favorite helper is doing," Henry replied. James appeared behind Henry, his smile wide. "Dad insisted on coming to see you. Said he wanted to check on your progress." Henry sat down in a nearby chair, his eyes twinkling. "So, how's it going, Ethan? Keeping these folks on their toes?" Ethan chuckled. "I'm trying." For the next hour, Henry and James listened as Ethan talked about his work. Henry's pride was evident in every nod and smile. "You're doing good, Ethan," Henry said as he stood to leave. "I knew you had it in you." Ethan watched as Henry and James walked out, his chest swelling with a mix of gratitude and determination. He wanted to make Henry proud, not just for what he'd done in the past, but for what he hoped to achieve in the future. A month into his job, Ethan had started to find his rhythm. The initial fear of making mistakes began to fade, replaced by a cautious confidence. He was no longer the kid struggling to keep up with filing and data entry. He was part of the team. One morning, James called Ethan into his office, a rare occurrence that immediately made Ethan's heart race. "Ethan, I've got a new project," James said, gesturing for him to sit. "It's small, but it's important. We're hosting a company networking event next week, and I need someone to oversee the logistics, delivery schedules, vendor communication, and setup. Think you're up for it?" Ethan blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "Me? But—" James interrupted with a smile. "You've proven yourself, Ethan. You're meticulous, you're hardworking, and you care about what you do. I believe you can handle this." Ethan nodded slowly. For the next week, Ethan poured himself into the project. He coordinated with vendors, double-checked orders, and planned the event setup down to the smallest detail. It was exhausting, but the satisfaction of seeing everything come together kept him going. The night of the event arrived, and Ethan stood in the background, watching as guests mingled and complimented the flawless organization. James approached him, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "You did it, Ethan. Everything went perfectly." Ethan smiled, his chest swelling with pride. For the first time, he felt like he was capable of more than just surviving, he was thriving. The next morning, Ethan's pride was overshadowed by a sense of unease. As he pedaled through Willow Grove on his paper route, he noticed an ambulance parked outside Henry Mason's house. Ethan dropped his bike and rushed toward the porch, where James stood with a somber expression. "What happened?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling. James's eyes were red-rimmed. "Dad passed away early this morning." Peacefully, in his sleep, Ethan's heart sank. Henry had been a constant source of encouragement, someone who believed in him when so few did. The funeral was held a few days later, a quiet affair attended by close family and friends. James invited Ethan to join them, and he sat beside Laura and Sophie, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. After the service, James handed Ethan an envelope. "This is for you," he said softly. Inside was a handwritten note from Henry. "Ethan, you reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that kindness still exists in the world. You've got a good heart, and you're going to do great things. Keep believing in yourself. Henry." Ethan folded the note carefully, tucking it into his pocket. The weight of Henry's words settled over him, a mix of grief and gratitude. Ethan's work continued, but the loss of Henry lingered in his mind, casting a shadow over his days. Meanwhile, tensions in Willow Grove began to rise. Some neighbors praised Ethan's hard work and determination, but others viewed his success with suspicion. One afternoon, as Ethan delivered papers, he overheard a conversation between two older boys on the street corner. "Think he's too good for the rest of us now," one of them muttered. Ethan's chest tightened. He wasn't trying to prove he was better than anyone, he just wanted to help his family. The tension came to a head one evening at the corner store. As Ethan paid for a loaf of bread, the clerk, Mr. Johnson, gave him a hard look. "Fancy job you've got now," Mr. Johnson said. "I'm just trying to help my family," Ethan replied, his voice steady but tinged with frustration. "Don't forget where you came from," Mr. Johnson warned, handing him his change. Ethan left the store, his mind racing. Was he really changing? Or was it the world around him that couldn't accept his efforts to grow? That night, Ethan vented his frustrations to Laura. "I don't get it, Ma. Why does everyone care so much about what I'm doing?" Laura sighed, sitting across from him. "Change makes people uncomfortable, Ethan. It makes them question their own choices. But that doesn't mean you're wrong for trying to do better." "I'm not leaving anyone behind," Ethan said firmly. "I know," Laura said, her eyes soft. "And the people who matter know it too." One particularly stressful day at work, Ethan found himself juggling more tasks than usual. David had asked him to sort a complex set of files, and James needed help reviewing his shipment schedule. Ethan's head swam with numbers and deadlines, and in his rush, he misfiled an important document. When the mistake was discovered, David pulled Ethan aside. "Ethan, I know you're trying your best, but you've got to slow down," David said gently. Ethan nodded, his cheeks burning with shame. That evening, as Ethan walked home, the weight of everything, the job, school, family, and the loss of Henry felt unbearable. At home, Laura noticed the tension in his posture. "What's wrong, Ethan?" she asked. "I don't know if I can do this anymore," Ethan admitted, his voice cracking. "I feel like I'm failing at work, at school, at everything." Laura wrapped her arms around him, her voice steady. "Ethan, you're not failing. You've taken on so much, and you're doing more than anyone your age should have to. It's okay to feel overwhelmed." Ethan let out a shaky breath. "I just want to make things better for us." "You already have," Laura said softly. Despite the tension with some of his neighbors, Ethan began to notice small glimmers of support. A few people who had once seemed indifferent started acknowledging his hard work. One morning, Mrs. Lopez flagged him down during his paper route. "Ethan, wait," she called, stepping on her porch with a plate of cookies. Ethan slowed his bike, confused. "Morning, Mrs. Lopez. Everything okay?" She handed him the plate. "Just a little thank you. I've seen how hard you've been working, and I'm proud of you. Not everyone would take on so much at your age." Ethan hesitated before taking the cookies. "Thank you," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. Moments like these were rare, but uplifting. They reminded Ethan that not everyone doubted him. Slowly, other small gestures followed: a friendly wave from a neighbor, an encouraging word from someone at the store. Even Mr. Johnson, the corner store clerk who had been critical before, seemed to soften. "Busy day at work?" Mr. Johnson asked one evening as Ethan bought milk. Ethan nodded cautiously. "Yeah, but it's getting better." "You're doing good, kid," Mr. Johnson said, surprising Ethan. "Keep it up." Though the tension in the community wasn't entirely gone, these moments gave Ethan a renewed sense of belonging. One quiet afternoon, Ethan sat on his bed, Henry's note clutched in his hand. He had read the words countless times, but they never lost their power. "You reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that kindness still exists in the world. You've got a good heart, and you're going to do great things. Keep believing in yourself." The words felt like a lifeline, especially now. Ethan thought about the way Henry had always seemed to see the best in him, even when Ethan couldn't see it himself. Feeling restless, Ethan grabbed his bike and rode to the Mason house. Though Henry was gone, the house still held his presence. James greeted him at the door, a mixture of surprise and warmth on his face. "Ethan, what brings you here?" "I just wanted to visit," Ethan admitted. James nodded, stepping aside. "Come in." They sat in the living room, the walls lined with photos of Henry and his family. Ethan's gaze lingered on a picture of Henry as a young man, standing proudly in front of a factory. "He used to tell me stories about his factory days," Ethan said softly. James smiled. He loved that place. Said it taught him the value of hard work and that no matter what job you do, you should do it with pride. Ethan nodded, his chest tightening. "He believed in me, even when I didn't. I don't want to let him down." "You won't," James said firmly. "You're already making him proud." Back at work, Ethan continued to prove himself. David and James began trusting him with more challenging tasks, and one day, James called him into his office again. "We got a big client order coming in next week," James said, sitting across from Ethan. "It's a high-stakes job, and I'd like you to oversee the initial organization." Ethan's eyes widened. "Me? But what if I mess up?" James smiled. "That's always a possibility, Ethan. But I believe in you, and I think you're ready for this. You'll have support if you need it." Ethan nodded, determination flickering in his chest. "That's it." The next week was a whirlwind of activity. Ethan spent hours coordinating delivery schedules, checking inventory, and ensuring everything was in place for the client's review. He stayed late most nights, the pressure building but never overwhelming him. When the job was finally completed, James gathered the team for a quick meeting. "I just want to take a moment to recognize Ethan," James said. "He stepped up in a big way for this project, and it couldn't have gone better." The team applauded, and Ethan's cheeks flushed. It was a small moment, but it meant the world to him. Just as things seemed to be improving, another challenge arose. A shipment mix-up at the office left a client frustrated, and Ethan, though not directly responsible, found himself caught in the fallout. David called Ethan into his office, his tone serious. "Ethan, I need to know if there were any errors on your end with this shipment." Ethan racked his brain, replaying every step of the process. "I don't think so," he said cautiously. "I didn't know that." "I believe you. But the client is upset, and we need to get to the bottom of this quickly." Though Ethan wasn't blamed, the experience shook his confidence. He spent the next few days double and triple-checking every task, worried about making even the smallest mistake. At home, Laura noticed the tension. "You're working yourself too hard again," she said one evening. "I just don't want to mess up," Ethan admitted. "You're human, Ethan," Laura said gently. "You're allowed to make mistakes. What matters is how you handle them." Ethan nodded, though the weight of responsibility still loomed over him. The pressures of Ethan's responsibilities at work, school, and home began to weigh heavily on him. While he had made strides in balancing his workload, the constant demand left little room for rest. At home, Laura's health continued to decline. One evening, after another long day, Ethan came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and her hands trembling as she folded a dish towel. "Ma, you okay?" Ethan asked, alarmed. Laura smiled weakly. Fine," Ethan, just a little tired. You should see a doctor, Ethan urged, sitting beside her. We can't afford that right now, Laura replied, shaking her head. Besides, it's nothing serious. Ethan's frustration bubbled to the surface. Ma, you've been saying that for weeks. You need to rest. Laura sighed, her expression softening. And who's going to keep things running if I don't? You're already doing more than enough, Ethan. The conversation left Ethan feeling helpless. He wanted to do more, but there were only so many hours in the day. At work, Ethan's growing fatigue began to show. One day, David noticed him struggling to keep his eyes open as he sorted through a stack of documents. Ethan, take a break, David said gently. I'm fine, Ethan insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. David frowned. You've been pushing yourself too hard. You can't pour from an empty cup, kid. Rest is part of the process. But Ethan found it difficult to heed the advice. The weight of expectations, both real and imagined, pressed on him constantly. Ethan's breaking point came one chaotic afternoon at the office. A shipment error left the entire team scrambling to fix the problem, and Ethan was tasked with finding missing paperwork related to the order. As he sifted through the files, his hands shaking from exhaustion, he realized he couldn't find the document. Panic set in, and his mind raced with worst-case scenarios. Ethan, where's that file? David asked, his tone more tense than usual. I don't know, Ethan stammered, his heart pounding. David sighed, running a hand through his hair. All right, let's retrace our steps. We'll figure it out. Though the issue was eventually resolved, Ethan felt like he had failed. As the day wore on, he withdrew further into himself, the weight of his perceived inadequacies threatening to crush him. That evening, Ethan sat on the porch steps of his house, staring out at the darkened street. Sophie joined him, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Gabby, why are you sad? She asked, her voice soft. Ethan forced a smile. I'm just tired, Squirt. Nothing to worry about. You do so much, Sophie said, resting her head on his shoulder. You're like a superhero. Ethan's chest tightened at her words. He didn't feel like a superhero. He felt like a fraud. When Laura found him later, still sitting outside, she sat beside him without a word. After a long silence, she placed a hand on his shoulder. Ethan, you don't have to do everything on your own, Laura said gently. We're a team, remember? It's okay to ask for help. Ethan looked at her, tears brimming in his eyes. But I don't want to let you down. You could never let me down, Laura said firmly, pulling him into a hug. The next day, Ethan woke up with a renewed sense of determination. He realized he couldn't keep pushing himself to the brink. It wasn't sustainable, and it wasn't what Henry or his family would have wanted. At work, he approached David. I wanted to say sorry about yesterday, Ethan said. I was overwhelmed, but I'm going to do better. David nodded, his expression kind. Ethan, you don't have to apologize. Mistakes happen. What matters is how you move forward. With David's support, Ethan began to tackle his tasks with a more measured approach. He learned to pace himself, prioritizing quality over speed. He also started leaning on his team more, recognizing that he didn't have to shoulder everything alone. At home, Ethan encouraged Laura to take a step back from her cleaning jobs, using part of his earnings to cover the gap. Though Laura was initially resistant, she eventually agreed, her health improving as she took time to rest. Sophie, too, noticed a shift. Ethan made a point to spend more time with her, playing games and helping with her schoolwork. Their bond grew stronger, and Sophie's laughter once again filled the house. One evening, as they sat together on the living room floor, Sophie looked up at Ethan and said, Gabby, you're my hero. Ethan smiled, his heart swelling. You're my hero too, Squirt. As Ethan found balance in his life, his relationship with the community began to improve as well. The whispers of doubt and resentment faded, replaced by nods of respect and quiet support. One Saturday, Mrs. Lopez invited Ethan and his family to a neighborhood potluck. Laura hesitated at first, but Ethan convinced her to go. At the gathering, neighbors who had once been critical of Ethan approached him with warm smiles. You've shown us what hard work looks like, Mr. Johnson said, clapping Ethan on the back. You've made us proud. Ethan's chest tightened at the words. For so long, he had felt like an outsider in his own neighborhood, but now he realized that his perseverance had made an impact. Later that evening, as Ethan helped clean up, Mrs. Lopez pulled him aside. "You've done something special, Ethan," she said. "You've reminded all of us that it's possible to rise above our circumstances." Ethan nodded, his throat tight with emotion. He hadn't set out to inspire anyone, he had simply wanted to help his family. But hearing those words filled him with a sense of purpose. Ethan's work life steadily improved as he continued to grow in his role. He found himself taking on increasingly complex tasks, each one a new opportunity to prove his capabilities. The trust that David and James placed in him became a source of motivation, and Ethan poured himself into learning every aspect of the job. One morning, James called Ethan into his office. "Ethan, we got a high-profile client," James began. "It's a big deal for the company, and I'd like you to take point on organizing their shipment schedules. It's a challenge, but I think you're ready." Ethan felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. "I'll do my best, Mr. Mason." James smiled. "I know you will." The project required meticulous planning. Ethan spent hours coordinating with vendors, triple-checking inventory, and ensuring every detail was accounted for. The workload was heavy, but this time, Ethan approached it with a balanced mindset. He delegated smaller tasks to his coworkers and asked for help when needed, drawing on the lessons he had learned. When the project was successfully completed, James gathered the team in the conference room to celebrate. "Ethan, you've outdone yourself," James said, raising a glass of sparkling cider. "Your dedication and attention to detail made all the difference." Ethan's cheeks flushed as his co-workers clapped and cheered. The moment felt surreal, a far cry from the overwhelmed boy he had been just months ago. At home, the effects of Ethan's growth were evident. Laura's health had improved significantly since she started resting more, and the household felt lighter without the constant strain of financial worry. One evening, as Ethan helped Sophie with her homework, Laura watched from the kitchen, her heart swelling with pride. "You've done so much for us, Ethan," Laura said, joining them at the table. "I can't thank you enough." "You don't have to thank me, Ma," Ethan replied. "We're a team, remember?" Laura smiled, her eyes misty. "We are, and I couldn't be prouder of the young man you're becoming." Sophie looked up from her workbook. "Does that mean Gabby's a grown-up now?" Ethan chuckled. "Not yet, Squirt, but maybe I'm getting there." The family shared a quiet moment of laughter, the kind of warmth that Ethan had fought so hard to protect. Word of Ethan's achievements began to spread beyond his immediate circle. The transformation in his family's life became a symbol of hope for the community, inspiring others to pursue their own goals despite the challenges of Willow Grove. One Saturday afternoon, Mrs. Lopez knocked on the Harper's door with an invitation. "We're hosting a neighborhood potluck," she said, "and it's in honor of Ethan. We all wanted to thank him for everything he's done." Laura and Ethan exchanged surprised looks, but Sophie clapped her hands in excitement. "You're famous, Gabby," she exclaimed. On the day of the potluck, Ethan arrived to find the Lopez backyard decorated with balloons and a large banner that read, "Thank you, Ethan." Tables were piled high with homemade dishes, and neighbors who had once doubted Ethan now greeted him warmly. Mr. Johnson, the corner store clerk, raised a toast. "To Ethan Harper, an inspiration to us all." Ethan stood, his heart pounding. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside him. "I didn't do this alone. My family, my mentors, and all of you have helped me along the way. I'm just glad I could make a difference." The applause that followed was overwhelming, and Ethan felt a deep sense of belonging he had never experienced before. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a sense of peace. He sat on his bed, holding Henry's note, which had become a talisman of sorts. "Keep believing in yourself, you're capable of more than you realize." Ethan smiled, folding the note carefully and placing it back in his drawer. He had come so far, but he knew his journey wasn't over. At breakfast, Sophie chattered excitedly about the potluck while Laura looked at Ethan with quiet pride. "What's next for you, Ethan?" Laura asked. Ethan thought for a moment. "I want to keep learning, keep growing. Maybe someday I can help others the way people have helped me." Laura nodded, her smile widening. "You got a good heart, Ethan. I know you'll do great things." As Ethan left for work, the sun rising behind him, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just working for his family anymore, he was building a future. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to dream, confident that he had the strength and support to make those dreams a reality. If you enjoyed this story of resilience, family, and community, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming tales that inspire and uplift. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your support means the world to us. Thank you for being part of our journey. In the quiet town of Oak Ridge, Mississippi, a single event sets off a chain reaction that will challenge the community's beliefs, test its resilience, and change lives forever. When a young boy, Jaden Carter, is tied to a tree by a police officer in an act of humiliation, the small town is forced to confront its own divisions and reckon with the truth about justice. But what happens when the boy's mother, a powerful judge, step in? How does the officer, Bryce Langley, face the fallout as his actions ripple through his personal and professional life? And can a divided community find common ground in the wake of pain and anger? This is a story of courage, redemption, and the power of resilience in the face of injustice. Stick around for a journey that will move you, challenge you, and leave you with a sense of hope. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in Jaden's or Langley's shoes? Let's dive in. Oak Ridge, Mississippi, sat nestled between sprawling cotton fields and dense pine forests, a town small enough for every face to seem familiar, but large enough for unspoken divisions to fester. Its streets wound through neighborhoods that seemed stuck in different decades. Downtown boasted a charming row of brick shops and a courthouse that looked as though it had leapt from the pages of a history book. Yet, only a few blocks away, potholes marred the roads leading to the older neighborhoods, where change arrived slower than the seasons. It was here that Officer Bryce Langley began his day, driving his patrol car through the familiar streets. Bryce liked his routines, even if they made his life feel small. He stopped by Randy's diner each morning for coffee, the staff greeting him with the deference reserved for those in uniform. "Morning, Officer Langley," May called from behind the counter, sliding his coffee across the polished surface. "Morning, May," Bryce replied, his voice gruff but not unkind. He stirred in a packet of sugar, his mind on the day ahead. Bryce was a creature of habit, and Oak Ridge suited him that way. But the town was changing, and he felt it in the way people looked at him. More protests in nearby Jackson had spilled into the news, reigniting old debates about law enforcement and race. Bryce didn't like the scrutiny. He told himself it was because outsiders didn't understand the job, but deep down, he knew there was more to it than that. Across town, Evelyn Carter poured herself a cup of coffee, savoring the brief quiet before her day began. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon toast and brewing coffee, a comfort amid her hectic schedule. "Jaden, let's go," she called, glancing at her watch. Her 13-year-old son, Jaden, appeared moments later, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "I'm ready, Mom," he said, grabbing a piece of toast on his way to the table. Evelyn smiled. Jaden was bright and full of energy, a stark contrast to her calm demeanor. As a federal judge, she'd learned to keep her emotions tightly controlled, but with Jaden, she allowed herself glimpses of softness. "Excited for debate practice?" she asked, watching him devour his toast. "Totally. We're going to crush regionals," he said with a grin. Then, more seriously, he added, "Mom, do you think anyone will even care if we win?" Evelyn's smile faded. "What do you mean?" Jaden shrugged. "It just feels like no one pays attention to the stuff we're doing. They care about sports or drama. But debate? It's like we don't even exist." Evelyn reached across the table, her hand resting on his. "Jaden, what you're doing matters. Speaking up and standing firm in what you believe, that's how real change starts. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." Jaden nodded, her words settling over him like armor. That afternoon, Jaden and his friends gathered at Oak Ridge Park, their notebooks spread across a picnic table as they practiced their arguments. The park was their usual meeting spot, a place where they could be loud without bothering anyone. "Okay, what about environmental impact?" Jaden asked, gesturing animatedly. "If they bring that up, we need a solid counterpoint. We could talk about renewable energy investments," his friend Marcus suggested, flipping through his notes. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of a police cruiser pulling into the gravel lot. The boys fell silent as Officer Langley stepped out, his boots crunching against the ground. "Afternoon," Langley said, his eyes scanning the group. "Afternoon, sir," Jaden replied, his voice steady. Langley's gaze landed on a spray-painted bench nearby. "You boys know anything about this?" "No, sir," Jaden said quickly. "We're just working on school stuff." Langley frowned, his hand resting on his belt. "You sure about that? Because it looks to me like you've been hanging around here a while." Jaden felt his pulse quicken, but kept his tone calm. "We didn't do it, officer. We've been here working on our debate practice." Langley stepped closer, his expression hardening. "You got a smart mouth on you, kid." Jaden clenched his fists, fighting to keep his composure. "We didn't do anything wrong," he said, louder this time. Langley's face darkened. "That's so." He reached for the zip ties on his belt. Before Jaden could react, Langley grabbed his arm and marched him toward a nearby tree. His friends watched in stunned silence as the officer bound Jaden's wrists behind his back, securing him to the rough bark. "You need to learn some respect," Langley said, his tone mocking. "This is what happens to punks who think they're above the law." Jaden's heart pounded in his chest, a mix of fear and fury coursing through him. Tears stung his eyes, but he blinked them back, refusing to let Langley see him cry. Unbeknownst to Langley, a jogger had stopped nearby, her phone raised as she recorded the scene. After what felt like an eternity, Langley cut Jaden free. "You're lucky I'm letting you off easy," he said, tossing the zip ties into the trash. Jaden said nothing, his jaw tight as he walked back to his friends. Jaden's mother was waiting when he got home, her sharp eyes immediately catching the tension in his posture. "What happened?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Jaden hesitated, then told her everything. As he spoke, Evelyn's expression darkened, her anger carefully controlled. "We're not letting this slide," she said when he finished. "But we'll handle it the right way. No shouting, no rash decisions. Understand?" Jaden nodded, though part of him wanted to scream his anger to the world. Evelyn sat in her home office late into the night, trying to concentrate on a case she was preparing. Legal briefs were spread across her desk, but her mind kept returning to Jaden's story. She could feel the familiar weight of righteous anger pressing against her ribs. Her phone buzzed on the desk. It was a notification from a local community group on social media. The title of the post read, "Oak Ridge Officer Harris's Teen in Park." Evelyn's heart sank as she tapped the link. The video was grainy but clear enough to show Jaden tied to the tree, Langley's mocking voice audible in the background. The caption read, "This is what happens in our town. Are we okay with this?" The comments poured in beneath the video. "Disgusting. This is abuse. Typical kids causing trouble. They got what they deserved. This officer should be fired." Evelyn set the phone down carefully, her fingers trembling. The anger she had held at bay now threatened to overflow. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "Control your emotions, Evelyn. You'll need a clear head for this fight." By morning, the video had reached every corner of Oak Ridge. At the diner, where Langley sipped his coffee and read the paper as usual, he noticed the stares. "What's all this about, Bryce?" May asked cautiously, placing his breakfast in front of him. "Just people stirring up trouble," Langley muttered, flipping the page of his paper. But his appetite was gone. He could feel the eyes of the other patrons boring into his back, whispers following him as he left the diner. Across town, Evelyn and Jaden sat in their kitchen, the tension palpable. Jaden scrolled through his phone, his expression a mix of anger and humiliation. "They're defending him," he said, showing his mother a comment that read, "This is what happens when kids act like thugs." "Don't waste your energy on them," Evelyn said, her tone calm but firm. "Focus on what we can do." Jaden nodded, but the words lingered in his mind. Evelyn spent the next several days building her strategy. She contacted a civil rights attorney, Carla Watkins, whose name was known in legal circles for her work on police accountability cases. "It's a solid case," Carla said after Evelyn briefed her. "You've got the video, and the officer's actions were clearly excessive. But cases like this are uphill battles, especially in towns like Oak Ridge." "I'm aware," Evelyn said, "but I'm not backing down." This isn't just about my son. It's about making sure this doesn't happen again. Carla smiled. I can see where your son gets his determination. Let's get to work. Meanwhile, Jaden began channeling his emotions into writing. The first time he picked up his pen, he didn't know where to start. But as the words began to flow, he felt a weight lifting from his chest. Bound, not broken. Silenced, but not defeated. The roots of justice run deep, and they cannot be cut. He shared the poem on social media, and it quickly gained attention. Messages of support poured in. Thank you for sharing this. You're so brave. Keep fighting. But there were also messages of hate, accusing him of exaggerating the incident or blaming him for being in the park in the first place. It's not fair, Jaden said one evening, showing his mother the comments. Why do they hate me for just being me? Evelyn hugged him tightly. Because some people are afraid of change, Jaden. But you don't let them win. You keep speaking your truth. The following weekend, a group of local activists organized a protest outside the Oak Ridge Police Department. The crowd was small but determined, their chants of justice for Jaden echoing through the streets. Jaden and Evelyn attended, standing near the front of the crowd. A reporter approached them, microphone in hand. Jaden, how does it feel to see this support? She asked. Jaden hesitated, then said, It feels good to know people care. But this isn't just about me. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. As the protest continued, a counter-protest formed across the street. Supporters of the police held signs that read, Back the Blue and Stop the Witch Hunt. The tension was palpable, but the protests remained peaceful. Evelyn watched the scene unfold with a quiet resolve. She knew this was just the beginning. At the police station, Chief Harold Timmons called Langley into his office. The older man's face was lined with stress as he gestured for Langley to sit. This video's become a problem, Timmons said, sliding a printed screenshot across the desk. Langley glanced at it, his jaw tightening. It's taken out of context, he said defensively. The kid was mouthing off, and I acted within protocol. Timmons sighed. Even if that's true, it doesn't look good. The mayor's been fielding calls all morning. People want your badge, Bryce. They don't know what it's like out there, Langley said. These kids don't respect authority anymore. Be that as it may, you're on desk duty until we figure this out, Timmons said. Langley stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. You're throwing me under the bus. I'm protecting this department, Timmons replied firmly. Langley stormed out, the weight of public scrutiny pressing down on him. As the protests gained momentum and the legal case took shape, Oak Ridge became a town divided. Evelyn received both praise and criticism for her decision to pursue justice. Some called her a hero. Others accused her of stirring up trouble. Late one night, as Evelyn reviewed legal documents, Jaden appeared in the doorway. Mom, he said quietly, do you think we're doing the right thing? Evelyn looked up, her expression softening. I know it feels overwhelming, Jaden, but standing up for what's right is never easy. Change takes courage, and you've shown more of that than most people ever will. Jaden nodded, her words settling into his heart. Oak Ridge simmered with tension as protests outside the police station grew larger. On one side of the street, activists held signs with messages like Justice for Jaden and End Police Abuse. Across the street, counter-protesters waved flags that read Support Our Police and Back the Blue. Jaden and Evelyn attended every peaceful demonstration, their presence symbolizing resilience. Jaden kept his head high despite the shouts from the opposing crowd. Go home, kid, a middle-aged man yelled. Stop blaming the police for your bad behavior. Evelyn placed a steadying hand on Jaden's shoulder, her calm demeanor anchoring him. Across the street, Bryce Langley sat in his car, watching the scene unfold. The chants for justice reached his ears, growing louder with each passing day. Each protest chipped away at the confidence he once had in his position. Langley's suspension hit harder than he expected. At home, the atmosphere was tense. His wife, Beth, tried to maintain a sense of normalcy for their two daughters, but the strain was evident. One evening, after the girls were in bed, Beth confronted him. Bryce, what were you thinking? Tying that boy to a tree? Langley sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. I was doing my job. They don't see what we deal with every day. Beth's eyes softened, but her voice held a note of warning. Bryce, you need to think about the bigger picture. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about our family and this whole town. Langley didn't respond. He stared out the window, the protests echoing in his mind. Jaden's poem continued to gain traction online, shared by activists and civil rights groups. Messages poured in from across the country, some offering support, others full of venom. In school, Jaden's classmates treated him differently. Some looked at him with newfound respect, while others avoided him altogether. "Hey man," Marcus said one day at lunch. "You're famous now." Jaden shrugged. "Famous for what? Getting tied to a tree?" "You're more than that," Marcus said firmly. "People are listening to you, Jay. That's power." Despite Marcus's encouragement, Jaden often felt overwhelmed. The weight of being a symbol for justice was heavy, and some days he wished things could go back to the way they were. Evelyn met regularly with Carla Watkins, the civil rights attorney handling the lawsuit. Together, they worked to build a case against Langley and the Oak Ridge Police Department, citing negligence and misconduct. "Langley's history is our strongest point," Carla said, pointing to a file of complaints that had been quietly dismissed over the years. "This isn't his first offense, and we can prove a pattern of abuse." Evelyn nodded, her jaw tight. "This town needs to see the truth. Too many people have been hurt because no one held them accountable." The town council held a forum to address the growing unrest. The community center was packed with residents eager to voice their opinions. Evelyn and Jaden sat near the front, listening as people stepped up to the microphone. A young woman spoke passionately about her own experience with police harassment. "This isn't just about one boy. This is about a system that lets people like Langley act with impunity." On the other side of the room, a man in his 60s stood to speak. "We can't vilify the people who protect us. Officer Langley made a mistake, but he's a good man." The room buzzed with tension, the divide between the two sides palpable. When Evelyn spoke, her voice carried above the noise. "This isn't about choosing sides," she said. "It's about accountability. Everyone deserves to feel safe in their community, no exceptions." Langley felt the walls closing in. His suspension meant long hours at home, where the silence was deafening. Beth began spending more time with her parents, taking the girls with her, leaving Langley alone with his thoughts. He turned on the news one evening and saw Jaden reading his poem at a protest. The boy's words cut deeper than Langley expected. "Justice grows from roots that cannot be cut. No matter how tightly you bind, the branches will rise." Langley turned off the TV, but the words stayed with him. For the first time, he wondered if he had been wrong. One night, Evelyn received a call from Carla. "We've got a break," Carla said. "A former officer from Oak Ridge is willing to testify. He says he left the department because of Langley's behavior." Evelyn felt a surge of hope. That could change everything. The former officer, a middle-aged black man named James Hill, met with Evelyn and Carla the following day. "Langley's been like this for years," Hill said. "I filed complaints, but they always got swept under the rug. He's protected by the Good OL Boys Club in that department." "Are you willing to testify in court?" Carla asked. Hill nodded. "If it means stopping him, I'll do it." Evelyn sat with Jaden one evening, the weight of the case bearing down on both of them. "Are you okay, Jay?" she asked. Jaden looked up from his notebook, where he was scribbling a new poem. "I don't know. Some days I feel like we're making a difference. Other days it feels like nothing's changing." Evelyn reached for his hand. "Change is slow, Jaden, but every step we take matters, even if we can't see it right away." Jaden nodded, her words giving him a small sense of comfort. The protests in Oak Ridge began to shift focus. Activists organized voter registration drives and community forums, channeling their energy into actionable change. Jaden spoke at one such event, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd. "We can't just talk about change," he said. "We have to be the change. That means voting, organizing, and holding people accountable." The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time, Jaden felt a glimmer of hope. Bryce Langley sat in the corner of his darkened living room, his mind replaying the moment at the park over and over. He had justified his actions to himself countless times, clinging to the belief that he was simply doing his job. But the more he thought about the look in Jaden's eyes, equal parts fear and defiance, the harder it became to maintain that illusion. Langley's phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from his wife, Beth. "We need some space, Bryce. I'm taking the girls to my parents for a while." He threw the phone onto the couch, his chest tight. The life he built was unraveling, and for the first time, he began to wonder if he had brought it on himself. Despite his growing platform, Jaden struggled to reconcile his newfound role as a voice for justice with his own feelings of vulnerability. Late one night, he sat on his bed, scrolling through social media. While most of the messages were supportive, the hateful comments stung deeply. One message read, "Stop playing the victim. You're just another punk looking for attention." Jaden closed the app and buried his face in his hands. He wanted to be strong, to live up to the expectations placed on him, but some nights the weight of it all felt unbearable. Evelyn found him sitting in the dark and sat beside him. "Talk to me, Jaden," she said gently. "I don't know if I can do this, Mom," he admitted, his voice cracking. "What if they're right? What if I'm just making things worse?" Evelyn wrapped her arms around him. "Jaden, you're doing something most people never have the courage to do. You're standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. That's not weakness, it's strength." Jaden nodded, her words a small balm to his frayed nerves. The controversy surrounding Jaden and Langley spilled into other parts of Oak Ridge life, including the local school board. Parents attended the monthly meeting in record numbers, many demanding that the school take a public stance on the issue. A woman stood to speak, her voice shaking with anger. "Our children deserve to feel safe, whether they're at school or in the park. What happened to Jaden Carter is unacceptable." Another parent countered, "And what about our officers? They're under attack just for doing their jobs. We need to teach our kids respect for authority." Jaden attended the meeting with Evelyn, watching the arguments escalate. Finally, he stood to address the board. "I'm not here to divide anyone," he said, his voice clear despite the lump in his throat. "I'm here because what happened to me isn't just about me. It's about making sure no one else has to go through it. We can do better as a town. I believe that." His words were met with a mix of applause and murmurs, but the sincerity in his voice left a mark on many. One afternoon, Carla Watkins received an email from an anonymous source claiming to have information about the Oak Ridge Police Department. The sender alleged that several complaints against Langley and other officers had been buried to protect the department's reputation. Carla forwarded the email to Evelyn, who read it with a growing sense of anger. "If this is true, it's bigger than just Langley," Evelyn said. "This could expose systemic issues in the department." Carla nodded. "We'll need to verify the claims, but if we can, it changes everything." Oak Ridge's once close-knit community was now fractured. Longtime friends found themselves on opposite sides of the issue, and the tension was impossible to ignore. At the grocery store, Evelyn overheard a conversation between two women in the produce aisle. "They're blowing this whole thing out of proportion," one said. "Langley's been a good officer for years." The other woman shook her head. "Good officers don't tie kids to trees. That boy deserves justice." Evelyn kept walking, her jaw tight. She knew change was never easy, but the growing divide in her town weighed heavily on her. At school, Jaden's friend Marcus found it harder to keep his temper in check. During a group project in history class, a classmate made a snide comment about Jaden's poem. "Maybe if you spent less time writing and more time behaving, you wouldn't have gotten in trouble," the boy sneered. Marcus slammed his fist on the table, his face red with anger. "Say that again, and see what happens." The teacher quickly intervened, pulling Marcus aside. Jaden found him later, sitting on the bleachers after school. "You can't let them get to you, man," Jaden said. Marcus shook his head. "I'm tired of this, Jay. Tired of them acting like you're the problem, when it's people like Langley who are ruining this town." "I get it," Jaden said quietly. "But we can't fight hate with more hate. That's not how we win." Chief Timmons called Langley into his office for a private meeting. The chief's face was lined with exhaustion, the weight of the town's unrest visible in his posture. "Bryce, I need you to understand something," Timmons said. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about the department, the town, everything." Langley bristled. "So, you're throwing me under the bus?" Timmons sighed. "No one's throwing anyone under the bus. But the truth is, your actions have consequences, and we're all feeling them. You need to take responsibility for what happened." Langley stared at the chief, his mind racing. For years, he had been protected by the department's unspoken code of loyalty. Now, that shield was crumbling. In the midst of the division, a group of local clergy organized a candlelight vigil in the park where the incident occurred. Jaden and Evelyn attended, joining a diverse crowd of residents. The soft glow of candles illuminated the night as speakers took turns sharing stories of resilience and hope. When it was Jaden's turn to speak, he stepped up to the microphone, his hands trembling slightly. "I want to believe Oak Ridge can change," he said. "But change doesn't just happen. We have to fight for it every day, and that fight starts with listening to each other." The crowd erupted into applause, and for the first time in weeks, Jaden felt a sense of unity in the air. As the protests continued, small signs of progress began to emerge. The police department announced plans to implement bias training for all officers, and the town council began discussing the creation of a civilian oversight board. Evelyn knew these were only first steps, but they were significant ones. "We're not done yet," she told Jaden one evening. "But this is how change starts, one step at a time." Jaden nodded, a spark of hope reigniting within him. The air inside the Oak Ridge courthouse was thick with tension as the civil rights lawsuit against Langley and the Oak Ridge Police Department officially began. Jaden sat with Evelyn and Carla Watkins, their legal team meticulously prepared. The defense attorney for Langley, a sharp-tongued man named Richard Givens, began his opening statement. "Officer Langley is a decorated officer with years of service to this community. This case is about a misunderstanding blown out of proportion, not malice or misconduct." Carla countered, her voice unwavering. "This case is about accountability. Officer Langley violated the dignity and rights of a 13-year-old boy. His actions reflect a larger systemic failure that cannot be ignored." The courtroom buzzed as the battle lines were drawn. Jaden felt the weight of every gaze in the room, but Evelyn's steady presence beside him gave him strength. On the second day of the trial, Jaden was called to testify. Dressed in a crisp shirt and tie, he stepped to the stand with his heart pounding. Carla approached him first, her tone gentle but firm. "Jaden, can you describe what happened at the park that day?" Jaden took a deep breath. "I was there with my friends, practicing for debate. Officer Langley came up to us and accused us of vandalizing a bench. When I told him we didn't do it, he grabbed me and tied me to a tree." Carla nodded. "How did that make you feel?" Jaden hesitated, then said, "Like I didn't matter. Like no one cared what I had to say." When Givens cross-examined Jaden, his questions were sharper. "Isn't it true that you've been vocal on social media, criticizing the police? Could your feelings about Officer Langley be biased?" Jaden met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "I speak out because what happened was wrong. That's not bias, it's the truth." When it was Langley's turn to take the stand, the courtroom grew silent. He avoided looking at Jaden as he spoke. "I've been a police officer for over 20 years, Langley began. "I've made mistakes, but my goal has always been to protect this community." Carla stood for her cross-examination, her voice sharp. "Officer Langley, did you believe a 13-year-old boy posed a threat that required him to be tied to a tree?" Langley's jaw tightened. "At the time, I believed I was de-escalating a situation." Carla pressed on. "De-escalating by humiliating a child? By ignoring his right to dignity?" Langley faltered, his earlier confidence slipping. "I didn't think it through." His words hung in the air, a partial admission that sent ripples through the courtroom. James Hill, the former officer who had come forward about Langley's past, took the stand next. His testimony revealed a troubling pattern of complaints that had been dismissed by the department. "Langley has a history of targeting people of color," Hill said, his voice steady. "I filed reports about his behavior, but nothing was ever done." The defense tried to paint Hill as a disgruntled former employee, but his credibility remained intact. His words cast a shadow over Langley's years of service, painting a picture of a system that had enabled misconduct. As the trial unfolded, the town of Oak Ridge buzzed with speculation. Some residents defended Langley, citing his years of service and the pressures of the job. Others, moved by the testimony, began to question the department's practices. Outside the courthouse, protesters gathered daily. On one side, signs demanded justice for Jaden. On the other, banners declared support for Langley and law enforcement. Jaden watched the protests from a courthouse window during a break in the trial. "It feels like the whole town is watching," he said to Evelyn. "They are," Evelyn replied. "And that's why what we're doing matters." One evening after court, Evelyn encountered Langley outside the courthouse. He was sitting on a bench, his shoulders slumped. "You've got what you wanted," he said bitterly as she approached. Evelyn stood tall, her gaze unwavering. "What I want is justice, Mr. Langley. For my son, for this town, and maybe even for you, if you're willing to face what you've done." Langley didn't respond, but her words lingered as she walked away. After days of emotional testimony, closing arguments were delivered. Carla urged the jury to see the broader implications of the case. This isn't just about one boy. It's about ensuring that no one in this community is made to feel powerless or less than human. The jury deliberated for hours before returning with their verdict. Langley was found liable for misconduct and ordered to pay restitution to the Carter family. Additionally, the Oak Ridge Police Department was mandated to implement reforms, including the establishment of a civilian oversight board. The courtroom erupted into mixed reactions. Some cheered, while others expressed outrage. Jaden felt a rush of relief, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the fight for justice was far from over. A week after the trial, Langley requested a meeting with Evelyn and Jaden. Though hesitant, Evelyn agreed. "I owe you both an apology," Langley said when they met at a neutral location. "What I did was wrong. I let my own biases blind me, and I hurt your family. I'm sorry." Jaden studied Langley for a long moment before replying. "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I hope you mean what you say, and I hope you'll do better." Langley nodded, his expression heavy with regret. "I will." The reforms mandated by the court began to take shape. Officers attended mandatory bias training, and the oversight board provided a new level of transparency. Evelyn joined as an advisor, ensuring the changes were implemented effectively. Though some residents resisted the changes, others embraced them as a step toward healing. Jaden returned to his routine, balancing school, debate team, and his growing role as an advocate for justice. His poem, "A Tree Grows in Justice," was published in a national magazine, and he was invited to speak at conferences and events. Despite the challenges, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had turned his pain into power, and though the road ahead was long, he was ready to walk it. Langley's life after the trial felt like walking through an empty house where every door was locked. His wife, Beth, had yet to return home, though she allowed him brief visits with their daughters. His suspension became permanent, and the department issued a public statement distancing itself from his actions. One evening, Langley sat alone in his small apartment, flipping through an old photo album. It was filled with images from his early days on the force back when he believed he was helping people. He stopped on a photo of himself shaking hands with a young black boy at a community event. He stared at it for a long time. When did I stop seeing people like him as kids? He wondered. For the first time, Langley felt not just regret, but the stirrings of something deeper, the desire to understand. The Oak Ridge Town Council hosted a meeting to discuss the implementation of the police reforms mandated by the court. Evelyn sat in the audience, her presence a quiet reminder of the case's impact. The mayor outlined the reforms, which included mandatory bias training, the establishment of a civilian oversight board, and new protocols for handling complaints. A local business owner stood to voice his skepticism. "Do we really think this is going to solve anything? It feels like overreach to me." Evelyn stood, her voice calm but commanding. "These reforms aren't about punishing the police. They're about building trust. Without accountability, trust can't exist, and without trust, our community cannot thrive." The room fell silent, her words resonating with even the staunchest skeptics. The newly formed Civilian Oversight Board held its first meeting, inviting residents to share their experiences with law enforcement. Evelyn attended as an advisor, sitting alongside community leaders and activists. One woman shared a story about her son being wrongfully detained. "It was years ago, but we never reported it. We didn't think anyone would believe us." A retired teacher recounted how officers had once ignored her calls for help. They assumed I was exaggerating because of my age. The stories painted a picture of systemic neglect, and the board vowed to address each case. Evelyn took detailed notes, knowing the road to change would be long, but determined to see it through. At school, Jaden began to notice a shift. Though some classmates still avoided him, others approached him with respect and curiosity. His teachers treated him as more than just a student, they saw him as a leader. One day in history class, his teacher, Mrs. Fletcher, led a discussion about civil rights. "Jaden," she said, "would you like to share your perspective?" Jaden hesitated, then said, "I think history isn't just what's in textbooks. It's what we're living right now. And we have a choice. Do we want to be the people who stand by and let things happen, or do we want to be the ones who make a difference?" The room was silent for a moment before Mrs. Fletcher nodded. "Well said." Langley began attending workshops on restorative justice, encouraged by his brother, a pastor in Alabama. At first, he felt out of place, surrounded by people sharing stories of harm and healing. But as he listened, something shifted. One man spoke about the lasting impact of humiliation. It's not just the moment itself, it's the way it makes you question your worth. It's a wound that doesn't heal easily. Langley felt the words hit him like a weight. He thought of Jaden tied to the tree, of his own voice mocking the boy. For the first time, he truly grasped the depth of the harm he had caused. Jaden was invited to speak at a youth empowerment summit in Jackson, where he performed his poem, "A Tree Grows in Justice," for an audience of hundreds. Standing on the brightly lit stage, he took a deep breath and began. "Bound, not broken. Silenced, but not defeated. The roots of justice run deep, and they cannot be cut." The audience erupted in applause, and Jaden felt a surge of pride. Afterward, a young girl approached him. "Your poem made me feel brave," she said shyly. Jaden smiled. "That's why I wrote it. Keep being brave." One evening, Jaden found an envelope in the mailbox with no return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Langley. "Jaden, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm trying to be better. Your strength has shown me the kind of person I should have been all along. Thank you for standing up, even when it was hard. Sincerely, Bryce Langley." Jaden handed the letter to Evelyn, unsure how to feel. "Do you think he means it?" he asked. Evelyn read the letter carefully. "Maybe he does," she said. "But forgiveness isn't about him. It's about you. Take your time." Inspired by Jaden's poem, the town came together to transform an empty lot into a community garden. Residents from all backgrounds worked side by side, planting flowers and vegetables as a symbol of unity and growth. Jaden visited the garden one afternoon and found Langley tending to a row of seedlings. Their eyes met briefly, and Langley gave him a small nod. Jaden hesitated, then nodded back. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a step toward understanding. Evelyn was invited to speak at a regional conference on judicial reform. In her keynote address, she shared the story of her fight for justice in Oak Ridge. "This isn't just about one town," she said. "It's about creating a system where accountability isn't the exception, it's the rule. Change is hard, but it's necessary. And it starts with all of us." Her speech received a standing ovation, cementing her role as a leader in the movement for systemic reform. Months after the trial, Oak Ridge began to feel different. The oversight board gained credibility, and the police department's bias training sessions were well underway. Small but significant changes took root in the town's culture. Jaden walked through the park one evening, stopping beneath the tree where it had all started. A plaque had been installed at its base, reading, "May this tree stand as a reminder of resilience, justice, and the power of community." Jaden smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in months. Months after the trial, Oak Ridge's streets felt quieter, though the echoes of the case remained. The Oversight Board began holding monthly public forums where residents could voice concerns or suggestions about law enforcement. Evelyn attended the first forum, sitting quietly in the back as citizens shared their stories. A young black woman stood and spoke about her fears growing up in Oak Ridge. "I always felt like the police were watching me, waiting for me to mess up," she said. "But seeing what happened to Jaden, and how he stood up gives me hope that things can change." Evelyn's heart swelled with pride. Her son's bravery had sparked something real in the community. Bryce Langley found himself spending most of his days at the community garden. The work was quiet, grounding, and gave him time to reflect. One afternoon, he worked alongside a local youth group planting flower. One of the boys, about Jaden's age, asked, "Why are you here? Aren't you that cop from the video?" Langley paused, considering his answer. "I'm here because I made a mistake," he said finally, "and I want to make it right." The boy studied him for a moment before nodding. "Okay, just don't mess up again." Langley laughed softly. "Fair enough." At school, Jaden's confidence had grown. His role as captain of the debate team brought him respect among his peers, and he used every opportunity to encourage others to speak up. One day during practice, a shy freshman stumbled through her argument, her voice barely above a whisper. "Take your time," Jaden said, his tone kind. "Your voice matters." The girl nodded, trying again with more confidence. Later, she pulled Jaden aside. "Thanks for helping me. I didn't think anyone would care." "I do," Jaden said. "And one day, you'll help someone else. That's how it works." Evelyn was invited to join a statewide task force on judicial reform. Her expertise and personal connection to the Oak Ridge case made her a natural fit. At their first meeting, Evelyn presented a proposal for a program that would pair judges with community leaders to improve trust in the justice system. "It's not enough to make rulings from the bench," she said. "We have to engage with the people we serve." Her ideas were met with enthusiasm, and the task force began laying the groundwork for implementation. One evening, Evelyn received a letter from an Oak Ridge resident who had attended one of the Oversight Board's forums. "Judge Carter, thank you for standing up for what's right. I used to feel like my voice didn't matter, but now I see that change is possible. You and Jaden have given this town hope." Evelyn folded the letter carefully, her heart swelling with gratitude. She placed it in her desk drawer alongside Langley's apology letter, a reminder of how far they had come. Jaden spent his summer interning at a youth empowerment nonprofit in Jackson. His days were filled with organizing events, mentoring younger students, and writing articles about social justice. During one workshop, Jaden led a session called Finding Your Voice. He encouraged attendees to share their stories, emphasizing the importance of speaking up even when it was difficult. A boy raised his hand hesitantly. "What if no one listens?" Jaden smiled gently. "Sometimes it feels that way. But even if only one person hears you, that can make all the difference." At the community garden's first harvest celebration, Langley approached Evelyn and Jaden. He held a small pot of herbs, the soil freshly turned. "This is for you," he said awkwardly, holding it out. "It's not much, but I wanted to contribute something." Jaden looked at the pot, then at Langley. "Thanks," he said after a moment, taking it. Evelyn nodded politely. "It's a start." Langley nodded in return, grateful for the small but significant gesture of acceptance. Jaden's poem, "A Tree Grows in Justice," gained national attention, and he was invited to perform it at a civil rights conference in Atlanta. The event brought together activists, educators, and young leaders from across the country. Standing at the podium, Jaden recited his poem with confidence. "They tied me to a tree, but my roots ran too deep. The branches reached for the sun, and justice began to grow." The audience rose to their feet, their applause echoing through the hall. For the first time, Jaden realized just how far his voice had carried. Late one evening, Evelyn sat on the porch, the warm glow of the garden lights illuminating her face. She thought about the journey she and Jaden had been on, the pain, the fights, and the small victories. She closed her eyes and whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. Though the road had been hard, she felt a deep sense of purpose. On the anniversary of the trial's verdict, the town held a dedication ceremony at the park. At the base of the tree where Jaden had once been humiliated, a plaque was installed. This tree stands as a symbol of resilience, justice, and hope for the future. May we never stop growing. Jaden stood beside Evelyn, their hands clasped as they read the words. "Do you think we've done enough?" Jaden asked. Evelyn smiled. "We've done a lot, but enough? That's for the next generation to decide. The work never really ends." Jaden nodded, feeling a quiet sense of pride. The start of a new school year brought fresh opportunities for Jaden. Now in high school, he joined the student government and started a club called Voices for Change, aimed at encouraging students to discuss social justice issues. The first meeting drew a modest crowd, but Jaden wasn't discouraged. Change doesn't happen overnight, he told the group. It happens because people care enough to start small and keep going. By the end of the month, the club had tripled in size. Students from different backgrounds began attending, sharing their stories and finding common ground. Langley continued his journey towards self-awareness. With the help of his brother, he joined a mentorship program for at-risk youth, where he worked with teenagers who reminded him of Jaden. One afternoon, Langley sat with a boy named Andre, helping him study for his history exam. "Why do you even care about helping me?" Andre asked suddenly. Langley paused, then said, "Because I didn't care enough before. And I'm trying to change that." Andre considered this, then nodded. "Guess we all mess up sometimes." Langley smiled faintly. "We do. But it's what you do after the mess up that matters." Evelyn's success with the State Task Force on Judicial Reform led to an invitation to testify before Congress about police accountability. It was a daunting prospect, but Evelyn accepted, knowing the stakes were too high to ignore. In Washington, D.C., she stood before a panel of lawmakers and shared her story. "My son's experience in Oak Ridge is not an isolated incident," she said. "It's a symptom of a system that needs transparency, accountability, and fairness. We owe it to the people we serve to do better." Her testimony received national attention, further solidifying her role as a leader in the fight for justice. The town of Oak Ridge held its annual Fall Festival, an event that drew residents together despite lingering divisions. The community garden, now a centerpiece of the park, hosted a booth where visitors could learn about its mission and contribute to its upkeep. Jaden volunteered at the booth, chatting with attendees about the garden's significance. "This place means more than just fresh vegetables," he told a woman admiring the rows of herbs. "It's about growth both for the plants and the people who work here." Langley stopped by the booth later that afternoon, offering a box of seedlings. "They're good for the soil," he said quietly. Jaden accepted them with a nod, their interaction brief but meaningful. Word of Jaden's club, Voices for Change, spread to other schools in the district. Students from neighboring towns reached out, asking for advice on starting their own chapters. Jaden traveled to speak at their meetings, sharing his journey and encouraging others to act. "It doesn't matter how small you start," he told them. "What matters is that you start." One student asked, "Do you think things can really change?" Jaden smiled. "They already are, and we're the proof." Langley's attempts to rebuild his personal life were slow but steady. One evening, he invited Beth to dinner, hoping to repair the damage his actions had caused their family. "I know I've put you and the girls through a lot," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I just want you to know I'm trying to be better for all of us." Beth studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You've got a long way to go, Bryce, but I'm glad you're trying." It wasn't a reconciliation, but it was a step forward. Carla Watkins, the civil rights attorney who had represented the Carters, visited Oak Ridge for a speaking engagement. She met with Evelyn and Jaden at the community garden afterward. "You two have done incredible work here," Carla said, admiring the vibrant rows of plants. "This town feels different than it did a year ago." Evelyn smiled. "It's far from perfect, but it's a start." Jaden added, "And we're not stopping anytime soon." Carla laughed. "I wouldn't expect anything less." As spring approached, the community garden expanded, adding a small orchard and a butterfly sanctuary. Jaden spent his weekends helping with the new additions, finding peace in the quiet labor. One afternoon, Evelyn joined him, kneeling beside him to plant a sapling. "This feels good," she said, patting the soil around the tree. "It does," Jaden agreed. "It's like we're leaving something better behind." Evelyn smiled, her heart full. "That's the goal, isn't it?" Jaden was stunned when he received an invitation to the National Youth Leadership Awards in Washington, D.C. He had been nominated for his work with Voices for Change and the community garden. At the ceremony, Jaden stood on stage, overwhelmed by the applause. "This award isn't just for me," he said in his acceptance speech. "It's for my mom, for Oak Ridge, and for everyone who believes that justice and growth are possible." Together, we can change the world one step at a time. On a quiet evening, Jaden and Evelyn walked through the park, the air filled with the scent of blooming flowers. They stopped beneath the tree where it all began, now standing tall and proud. Jaden read the plaque at its base once more. This tree stands as a symbol of resilience, justice, and hope for the future. Do you think we'll ever be done? Jaden asked. Evelyn shook her head, a soft smile on her face. The work never ends, Jaden, but as long as we keep planting seeds, there will always be hope. As they walked away, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in golden light. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Thank you for listening to this powerful story about resilience, justice, and the importance of community. If you enjoyed this narrative and want to hear more stories that inspire, challenge, and move you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Together, we can explore more stories that spark conversations and drive meaningful change. See you next time. What would you do if standing up for who you are meant challenging everything around you? When Jaden Turner moved to a new school, he hoped to make friends, play basketball, and fit in. But things took an unexpected turn when his coach gave him an ultimatum: cut his locks a part of his identity or lose his place on the team. What started as a battle over a hairstyle quickly became a fight for respect, unity, and change. This is the story of how one boy's courage inspired a school, rallied a community, and sparked a movement. Stay tuned to discover how Jaden's journey unfolds and the surprising turn it takes when he refuses to back down. If stories of resilience and empowerment move you, hit that subscribe button now and share where you're watching from in the comments below. Your voice matters just like Jaden's did. Now, let's dive into this unforgettable story. Jaden Turner tightened the straps of his backpack as he stood in front of Valley Creek Middle School, a building much larger than the one he had left behind in the city. Its clean, modern facade gleamed under the mid-morning sun, but the sight didn't comfort him. His palms were sweaty, his heart a drumbeat in his chest. He glanced at his mother, Ava, who offered him an encouraging smile. "You've got this, sweetheart," she said, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Just be yourself, okay? You're more than enough." Jaden nodded, though her words did little to ease the knot of anxiety in his stomach. The move to this quiet suburban town had been sudden, driven by Ava's new nursing position. His dad, Marcus, had stayed behind to wrap up his commitments as a community leader, but promised to join them soon. Walking through the school's glass doors, Jaden was immediately engulfed by the chaos of first-day energy. Lockers slamming, laughter bouncing off the walls, and the buzz of new beginnings. Despite the noise, he felt out of place. He could feel eyes on him, lingering a beat too long on his hair, thick locks tied neatly back, a symbol of his culture and family pride. He kept his head high, repeating his mother's words in his mind. "You're more than enough." Mrs. Willard, his homeroom teacher, greeted him with a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Class, this is Jaden Turner," she announced. "He's new, so let's make him feel welcome." The murmurs were subtle, but audible enough to make Jaden's neck flush. He took the seat Mrs. Willard indicated at the back of the room. Whispers tickled the air around him, their words indistinct, but their meaning clear. "Who's the new kid?" As class progressed, Jaden found it difficult to concentrate. His thoughts drifted to his old school, where he never had to worry about standing out. There, kids of all backgrounds wore their identities proudly: afros, braids, locks, and everything in between. Here, he felt like a single thread in a blank tapestry. At lunch, Jaden wandered into the cafeteria, scanning for a welcoming face. Relief washed over him when a girl waved him over. "Hey, I'm Emily," she said brightly, sliding her tray aside to make room for him. "This is Ethan." Ethan, a quiet boy with glasses, nodded shyly. "Hi." Jaden offered a small smile. "Thanks for letting me sit with you." The conversation flowed easily. Emily asked about his old school, and Ethan chimed in with a few questions about his favorite basketball players. For a moment, Jaden felt a flicker of hope. That hope dimmed when a voice cut through their laughter. "Nice hair," sneered a boy from a nearby table. "Trying to be a rapper or something?" Jaden froze, the words hitting like a gut punch. The boys' friends chuckled, their snickers sharp and grating. "Ignore him," Emily said softly, her tone laced with annoyance. "That's Ryan. He's just a jerk." Jaden clenched his fists under the table, heat rising in his chest. He wanted to respond, to say something that would shut Ryan up for good, but he didn't want to cause a scene. Instead, he forced himself to breathe and focus on Emily and Ethan's chatter. Jaden's excitement for basketball tryouts later that week helped distract him from the uneasy start. Basketball had always been his escape, the place where he felt most alive. When he arrived at the gym, he was greeted by Coach Greg Miller, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a commanding presence. Coach Miller's piercing blue eyes swept over the group of hopefuls before landing on Jaden. "You're the new kid," Coach Miller said, his voice gruff. "Yes, sir," Jaden replied, standing tall. Coach Miller's gaze lingered on Jaden's locks for a moment before he turned his attention to the clipboard in his hands. "All right, let's see what you've got." Jaden poured his heart into every drill, pushing himself to be faster, sharper, stronger. He sank shot after shot, the ball slicing through the air like it was born to fly. He could feel the other players watching, some with grudging respect, others with poorly hidden skepticism. When the tryouts ended, Coach Miller called Jaden aside. "You've got talent, kid," he said, his tone unreadable. "But if you're going to be on my team, you've got to look the part. We have standards here, no distractions." Jaden stared at him, the implication clear. That night, Jaden replayed the coach's words in his mind. No distractions. His locks, a connection to his roots and his dad's unwavering pride in their heritage, were now being labeled as unprofessional. When Ava asked how tryouts went, Jaden hesitated. "It was fine," he mumbled. Ava frowned, sensing his unease, but didn't press him. In his room, Jaden picked up a framed photo of his family from his nightstand. His dad had always said, "Your hair tells your story, son. Don't ever let anyone take that from you." But here he was questioning whether it was worth holding on to that story if it meant standing out even more. At school the next day, Jaden avoided Coach Miller's gaze during gym class. Emily and Ethan noticed his silence, their concern evident. "You okay?" Ethan asked. Jaden shrugged. "Yeah, just thinking." When practice rolled around, Coach Miller's eyes narrowed as he spotted Jaden's locks still intact. He didn't say anything, but his displeasure hung in the air like a storm cloud. By the end of practice, Jaden was exhausted not just physically, but emotionally. He couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how hard he worked, it wouldn't be enough to erase the judgment he saw in Coach Miller's eyes. That weekend, Jaden finally opened up to Ava. "Coach wants me to cut my hair," he said quietly, his voice heavy with frustration. Ava's expression hardened. "What? That's ridiculous. Your hair has nothing to do with your ability to play basketball." Jaden nodded, but the weight of the ultimatum still pressed down on him. "You don't have to change who you are, Jaden," Ava continued. "Not for him. Not for anyone. Your dad and I raised you to be proud of yourself, exactly as you are." Her words reignited a flicker of resolve in Jaden. He wasn't sure how he would handle Coach Miller, but he knew one thing. He wasn't ready to give up a piece of himself to fit someone else's mold. The Monday after practice, Jaden walked into the gym, determined to ignore the unease growing inside him. He loved basketball too much to let Coach Miller's remarks shake him. As warm-ups began, he focused on his drills, blocking out everything else. Coach Miller, clipboard in hand, paced the sidelines. "Focus, team," he barked, his sharp tone echoing across the gym. When his gaze landed on Jaden, his expression hardened. "Turn her over here," he called. Jaden jogged over, gripping the basketball tighter than necessary. "Did I stutter last week?" Coach Miller asked, his voice low enough that the other players couldn't hear. Jaden hesitated. "No, sir." "Then why do you still have this?" Coach gestured toward Jaden's locks, his tone dripping with disapproval. Jaden's stomach churned. "It doesn't affect how I play," he replied, keeping his voice steady. Coach Miller's jaw tightened. "It affects team cohesion. I don't need distractions out there. You got until Friday to fix this. Am I clear?" Jaden nodded, swallowing the words he wanted to say. The ultimatum weighed heavily on Jaden. He avoided Emily and Ethan during lunch, too ashamed to admit what was happening. But Emily noticed his absence and found him in the library. "What's going on?" she asked, sitting across from him. Jaden hesitated before blurting it out. "Coach wants me to cut my locks. Says they're a distraction." Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's ridiculous. Your hair is part of who you are." Jaden nodded but sighed. "I don't want to cause trouble. I just want to play basketball." "Standing up for yourself isn't causing trouble," Emily insisted. "Coach Miller is wrong, and you shouldn't have to change to make him comfortable." Ethan, who had quietly joined them, added, "We've got your back. Whatever you decide." As Friday approached, Jaden's anxiety mounted. Practice had become a minefield of stares and whispers. Ryan, the same boy who had mocked him at lunch, had taken to making snide comments under his breath. "Better listen to the coach," Ryan sneered during a water break. "Don't want to be benched, do you?" Jaden gritted his teeth, refusing to give Ryan the satisfaction of a reaction. The night before the game, Ava found Jaden sitting on his bed, staring at a pair of scissors in his hands. "You don't have to do this," she said, sitting beside him. Jaden looked up, his eyes filled with frustration. "But what if I don't? What if he benches me? Basketball is my thing, Mom. Without it, I don't know who I am here." Ava placed a hand on his shoulder. "Basketball is what you do, Jaden. It's not who you are. Don't let anyone make you feel like you have to change yourself to belong." Friday's practice was grueling. Coach Miller pushed the team harder than ever, his eyes often darting toward Jaden as if daring him to challenge the unspoken rule. When practice ended, Coach called the team to the center of the court. "Tomorrow's game is a big one," he announced. "I expect every player to show up ready to represent this school with discipline, professionalism, and unity." His eyes locked on Jaden. The message was clear. After practice, Jaden stayed behind, running drills alone. The rhythmic bounce of the ball echoed in the empty gym, each sound amplifying his frustration. "Hey!" Jaden turned to see Emily and Ethan standing by the bleachers. "You're not alone in this," Emily said firmly. "You don't have to fight him by yourself." Jaden's chest tightened, gratitude mixing with a renewed sense of determination. When Jaden arrived at the gym the next morning, his locks were tied back as always. Coach Miller's scowl deepened when he saw him. "You're not playing today," Coach said, his voice flat. Jaden's heart sank. "What? Why?" "I gave you a chance to meet our standards," Coach replied, his tone laced with disdain. "You chose not to." The team stood silently, their expressions a mix of confusion and discomfort. Jaden felt the sting of humiliation as he turned and walked out of the gym, his head held high despite the lump in his throat. News of Jaden's benching spread quickly. Emily and Ethan rallied their classmates, sharing the story through social media and urging others to stand with Jaden. The response was overwhelming. By Monday, students began showing up with hairstyles that celebrated their heritage: braids, afros, locks, and more. The principal called Jaden into her office. "I've heard about what's been going on," she said carefully. "Is there anything you'd like to share?" Jaden hesitated. "Coach says my hair is a distraction," he finally said. "But it's not. It's part of who I am." The principal frowned. "I'll look into this. In the meantime, thank you for speaking up." Coach Miller doubled down, dismissing the students' solidarity as attention-seeking. But the protests only grew louder. Parents began calling the school, demanding answers. Jaden's dad, Marcus, arrived that evening. "We're not letting this slide," he told Jaden firmly. Together, they reached out to local activists and a civil rights lawyer, building a case against the school's discriminatory practices. By the end of the week, dozens of students and parents gathered outside the school gym, holding signs that read, "Our hair, our identity, and respect diversity." The local news picked up the story, broadcasting Jaden's courageous stand. Coach Miller's behavior was put under scrutiny, and the school board was forced to address the issue. Jaden, standing with his friends and family, felt a surge of hope as the crowd chanted in unison. For the first time since moving to Valley Creek, he felt like he belonged, not just as a basketball player, but as himself. Jaden stood in the crowd of protesters outside Valley Creek Middle School, his heart pounding as chants of "Respect our identity" filled the air. He hadn't expected this: so many students, parents, and even teachers standing alongside him. Signs bobbed above the sea of heads, their bold messages clear. "Diversity is strength, and our hair, our pride. Emily stepped up beside him, holding a megaphone. Jaden, do you want to say something? Jaden hesitated. Public speaking wasn't his strength, and the thought of all those eyes on him made his stomach churn. But then he thought about everything he'd endured. Coach Miller's words, the humiliation of being benched, the sense of being unwelcome. He took the megaphone. I never wanted to be the center of attention, he began, his voice shaky but growing stronger. I just wanted to play basketball. But when someone tries to take away a part of who you are, that's not something you can ignore. My hair isn't just hair. It's a part of my family, my culture, my identity, and no one should have to give that up to fit in. The crowd erupted into cheers, their support bolstering Jaden's confidence. The school board scheduled an emergency meeting to address the growing controversy. Jaden's father, Marcus, arrived in a crisp suit, his commanding presence filling the room. He held Jaden's hand tightly as they walked to the front of the packed auditorium. The meeting began with the principal reading a carefully worded statement. The school values diversity and inclusion. We take these concerns seriously and are conducting a thorough review of the events in question. Marcus stood, his voice calm but firm. This isn't just about policy. It's about my son being treated with respect. Coach Miller's actions were not only discriminatory, but humiliating. We demand accountability. As Marcus spoke, Jaden glanced around the room. He saw parents nodding in agreement, teachers looking uncomfortable, and Coach Miller sitting stiffly in the corner. When it was Jaden's turn to speak, he stepped up to the microphone. I love basketball, he began, but I also love who I am. No one should have to choose between the two. All I want is to be treated fairly like every other kid in this school. The board promised to investigate, but tensions in the community deepened. Supporters of Coach Miller argued that he was just enforcing discipline, while others rallied behind Jaden, insisting that the school needed to change. Jaden's classmates continued to show solidarity, with more students wearing hairstyles that celebrated their heritage. Ryan, however, remained vocal in his opposition. Why does everything have to be about him? Ryan muttered in the hallway one day. It's just hair. Jaden turned to face him, his voice steady. If it's just hair, then why does it bother you so much? Ryan had no answer. As the story spread, local news stations picked up the story. Reporters gathered outside the school, eager to interview Jaden and his family. Marcus used the opportunity to highlight the broader issue of discrimination in schools. Jaden's story is one of many, Marcus told a reporter. This isn't just about a basketball team. It's about creating an environment where all students feel valued and respected. The media attention brought both support and criticism. Some viewers applauded Jaden's bravery, while others accused the family of blowing things out of proportion. Jaden struggled with the added scrutiny, but found strength in the messages of encouragement pouring in from around the country. Despite the ongoing controversy, Coach Miller continued to hold practices. When Jaden attended, determined not to let the coach intimidate him, the tension was palpable. During a particularly intense drill, Jaden stumbled, and Coach Miller's frustration boiled over. Maybe if you spent less time worrying about your image and more time practicing, you'd actually be worth something on this court, Coach snapped. Jaden froze, the words cutting deeper than any physical injury. For a moment, the gym fell silent, the other players staring at the ground. I'm done, Jaden said quietly, dropping the ball and walking out. That evening, Jaden sat on the couch, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on him. You don't have to go back there, Marcus said firmly. We'll fight this another way. He reached out to a civil rights lawyer, who agreed to take on the case. Together, they drafted a formal complaint against the school, citing discriminatory practices and emotional harm. Marcus also organized a town hall meeting, inviting parents, students, and community leaders to discuss the issue. The auditorium buzzed with energy as the town hall began. Marcus opened with a passionate speech about the importance of cultural expression and the harm caused by prejudice. One by one, attendees shared their own experiences with discrimination, their voices blending into a powerful chorus of resilience and demand for change. When it was Jaden's turn to speak, he stepped up to the podium. I didn't ask for this fight, he said. But now that it's here, I'm not backing down. This isn't just about me. It's about making sure no one else has to go through this." The room erupted in applause, the community's support tangible. The next day, the school board announced that Coach Miller had been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation. While it wasn't the complete victory Jaden and his family hoped for, it was a step in the right direction. Jaden's classmates greeted him with cheers when he walked into school. Emily and Ethan were waiting by his locker, their faces bright with pride. "You did it," Ethan said. "We all did it," Jaden replied, a small smile breaking through the weight of the past few weeks. With Coach Miller temporarily gone, Jaden felt some of the pressure lift. But he knew the fight wasn't over. His family and the community continued to push for permanent changes to the school's policies, ensuring no other student would face what he had. Late one evening, Jaden sat at his desk, writing in his journal. The words came slowly at first, but soon they flowed. "I didn't think I was strong enough for this, but I am. And I'll keep fighting not just for me, but for everyone who's been told they're not enough." In the days following Coach Miller's suspension, the energy at Valley Creek Middle School shifted. Students walked through the halls with newfound pride, wearing their cultural expressions boldly. Jaden noticed more students with braids, locks, afros, and other diverse hairstyles, a quiet but powerful show of solidarity. Jaden's father, Marcus, worked tirelessly, coordinating with civil rights organizations and rallying community leaders to support policy reforms at the school. The local media continued covering the story, keeping the pressure on the administration to act decisively. Emily and Ethan, always by Jaden's side, had taken on leadership roles among the student body. They organized a petition demanding permanent changes, including diversity, training for staff, and protections for cultural expression. Over 300 signatures so far. Emily told Jaden one afternoon, "We're not stopping until they listen." Jaden and Marcus were called to a meeting with the school principal, Mrs. Holloway. She greeted them with a tense smile, a folder of documents neatly stacked on her desk. "Mr. Turner, Jaden," she began, folding her hands. "Let me start by saying that we deeply regret how this situation has unfolded. We're working to address the concerns raised." Marcus's expression remained calm but firm. "This isn't about regret, Mrs. Holloway. It's about action. Words won't undo the harm done to my son or others who've faced similar treatment." Jaden spoke up, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. "I just want to play basketball and feel like I belong here without having to change who I am." The principal nodded. "We're reviewing our policies and consulting with experts to ensure a more inclusive environment moving forward." Marcus leaned forward. "We'll hold you to that." That weekend, a rally was held in the town square, drawing a diverse crowd of students, parents, and local leaders. The event, organized by Marcus and several community groups, aimed to raise awareness and demand lasting change. Jaden stood on the small stage, his heart racing as he looked out over the sea of faces. Holding the microphone tightly, he spoke from the heart. "I've learned a lot over the past few weeks," he began. "About courage, about standing up for what's right, and about how powerful we can be when we come together. This isn't just about me. It's about making sure no one else feels like they have to hide who they are." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers filling the crisp evening air. Jaden stepped back, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. The following week, the school board announced the findings of their investigation. In a public statement, they acknowledged that Coach Miller's actions were inappropriate and violated the school's commitment to fostering an inclusive environment. "We have decided to terminate Coach Miller's employment effective immediately," the board president announced at a press conference. "Additionally, we are implementing mandatory cultural awareness training for all staff and revising our policies to better protect students' rights." Jaden and Marcus watched the announcement together at home. Marcus placed a hand on Jaden's shoulder. "You did this, son. Your courage made this happen." Jaden nodded, a lump forming in his throat. It wasn't just relief, he felt it was a sense of justice, a validation of everything he had endured. Returning to school after the announcement, Jaden was met with smiles, high fives, and pats on the back. Emily and Ethan greeted him at his locker, their grins wide. "You're officially a hero," Ethan said, nudging him playfully. "Not just me," Jaden replied. "We all made this happen." The basketball team held its first practice with a new interim coach, Mr. Daniels, who emphasized teamwork and respect. Jaden felt a weight lift as he ran drills, no longer under the critical eye of Coach Miller. For the first time in weeks, basketball felt like a refuge again. The school began rolling out new initiatives, including a diversity and inclusion task force that included students, parents, and teachers. Jaden was invited to join as a student representative. At the first meeting, he shared his story, emphasizing the importance of representation and respect. His words inspired others to speak up, transforming the room into a space of shared understanding and commitment. "I'm proud of you," Ava told him that evening. "You turned something painful into something powerful." As the school year progressed, the changes became more visible. Posters promoting diversity adorned the walls. Teachers incorporated cultural discussions into their lessons, and the administration launched a mentorship program to support students from underrepresented backgrounds. Jaden continued to excel on the basketball court, earning the respect of his teammates and becoming a leader both on and off the court. During a school assembly, Mrs. Holloway announced that a new elective course on cultural diversity would be offered the following year. "It's called the Jaden Turner Initiative," she said, her gaze landing on Jaden. The auditorium erupted into applause, and Jaden felt his cheeks warm with pride. On a quiet afternoon, Jaden sat on the bleachers after practice, watching the sunset cast golden light across the gym. Emily and Ethan joined him, their laughter echoing in the empty space. "Think you'll ever miss being just a new kid?" Emily teased. Jaden laughed. "Not a chance. I like being me." They sat in comfortable silence, the weight of the past weeks finally beginning to fade. Jaden knew the fight wasn't over. There was always more work to be done. But for now, he felt at peace, knowing he had made a difference. Jaden walked through the halls of Valley Creek Middle School, feeling a sense of calm he hadn't known since arriving. The whispers and stares had been replaced by friendly greetings and nods of respect. Students wore hairstyles celebrating their heritage without fear, and the school's atmosphere felt noticeably lighter. In his first diversity and inclusion task force meeting, Jaden listened as other students shared their experiences. One girl spoke about how she'd hidden her natural hair under a straightened wig for fear of being judged. "Your story gave me the courage to stop hiding," she said, smiling at Jaden. Her words filled him with pride. He realized that his journey had become more than just about basketball or his own struggles. It was about creating a space where everyone could feel seen and valued. As the school year drew to a close, the administration hosted a special assembly to highlight the changes inspired by Jaden's story. Mrs. Holloway stood at the podium, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Today, we celebrate the courage it takes to stand up for what's right." Jaden Turner reminded us all that every student deserves respect and dignity. Jaden was called to the stage, where he received a plaque honoring his contributions to the school community. The audience erupted into applause, and Jaden spotted his parents in the crowd, their faces glowing with pride. Afterward, Marcus pulled Jaden into a tight hug. "You turned a moment of pain into something powerful," he said. "Never forget how much strength that took." The basketball team made it to the regional championship, and Jaden, now a starter, felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The game was close, each point hard-earned. With seconds left on the clock, the ball landed in Jaden's hands. He dribbled past two defenders, leaped, and sank a clean three-pointer just as the buzzer sounded. The gym erupted in cheers as his teammates rushed to lift him onto their shoulders. For Jaden, the victory was about more than just basketball. It was a symbol of how far he'd come. Over the summer, the school began implementing the changes Marcus and the community had fought for. Teachers attended cultural awareness workshops, and the new diversity course became one of the most popular electives. Jaden was invited to help design the curriculum, working with educators to ensure it reflected real experiences and challenges. He poured his heart into the project, determined to make it meaningful for future students. One day, as Jaden walked through the school with Ethan and Emily, they paused to admire a mural that students had painted in the courtyard. It depicted children of diverse backgrounds holding hands beneath the words, "Our differences make us stronger." "That's pretty awesome," Ethan said. "Yeah, Jaden replied, smiling. It really is. On a quiet evening at home, Jaden sat at his desk, writing an essay for the school newspaper. Titled Finding Strength in the Struggle, the piece detailed his journey, from the initial humiliation to the unity and change that followed. When it was published, students and teachers alike praised Jaden for his honesty and vulnerability. Messages poured in from readers, thanking him for sharing his story and inspiring others to embrace their identities. One note, written by a younger student, read, "Because of you, I don't feel scared to be myself anymore." Jaden kept the note pinned to his wall, a reminder of why his fight had mattered. As the new school year began, Jaden was invited to speak at a community event focused on fostering inclusion in schools. Standing at the podium, he felt a familiar wave of nerves, but also a growing sense of purpose. "I've learned that change isn't easy," he said, addressing the crowd. "But it starts with believing that your voice matters. When we stand together, we can create a world where everyone feels valued." The audience gave him a standing ovation, and Jaden stepped off the stage, his heart swelling with pride. The new Cultural Diversity course was officially named the Jaden Turner Initiative. On the first day of class, Jaden visited to share his story with the students. "Your identity is your strength," he told them. "Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you have to change to belong." The students listened intently, their eyes wide with admiration. Jaden could see the impact his words were having, and it gave him a deep sense of fulfillment. On the last day of school, Jaden walked through the halls, reflecting on how much had changed. The banners promoting diversity and inclusion were a stark contrast to the school he had first entered. Emily and Ethan joined him at the front steps, their laughter echoing as they reminisced about the past year. "You've got your own course named after you now," Emily teased. "What's next?" "The Jaden Turner Scholarship." "Hey, I like the sound of that," Jaden said, grinning. As he stepped out into the summer sun, Jaden felt a sense of closure. He had come to Valley Creek as an outsider, but now he was leaving as someone who had made a lasting difference. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. And as Jaden looked toward the future, he knew he would carry the lessons he'd learned with him, lessons of resilience, community, and the power of standing up for what's right. Years later, Jaden returned to Valley Creek as a guest speaker at the school's annual Diversity Day. The auditorium was packed with students eager to hear from the boy whose courage had transformed their community. Standing on the stage, Jaden spoke with confidence and warmth, sharing his journey and encouraging others to embrace their unique identities. When he finished, the room erupted into applause, and Jaden felt a profound sense of peace. His story had become a part of the school's fabric, a testament to the power of standing firm in the face of adversity. As he walked through the halls one last time, he saw students laughing, learning, and celebrating their differences. And Jaden knew that he had helped pave the way for them to do so freely and proudly. Years later, Jaden returned to Valley Creek as a guest speaker at the school's annual Diversity Day. The auditorium was packed with students eager to hear from the boy whose courage had transformed their community. Standing on the stage, Jaden spoke with confidence and warmth, sharing his journey and encouraging others to embrace their unique identities. "Change doesn't come easy," he said, his voice steady. "But when you stand up for what's right, when you find the courage to be yourself, you can inspire others to do the same. And together, we can build something truly powerful." When he finished, the room erupted into applause, and Jaden felt a profound sense of peace. His story had become a part of the school's fabric, a testament to the power of standing firm in the face of adversity. As he walked through the halls one last time, he saw students laughing, learning, and celebrating their differences. And Jaden knew that he had helped pave the way for them to do so freely and proudly. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If Jaden's journey inspired you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another story like this one. Let us know in the comments where you're reading from, and check out our channel for more uplifting and powerful tales of resilience and change. Together, we can keep spreading these messages of hope and strength.